In this video, I'm going to teach you how to open an image and import a hand-drawn element within. Then I'm going to teach you a whole bunch of commands to modify a hand-drawn element, and we're going to work with layers within Photoshop to do this. And then once this hybrid rendering looks exactly how we want it, we're going to save it as a JPEG and print it. So the first thing to do once you've opened Photoshop is to go to the File menu and hit Open. And go ahead and browse for your two images. We're going to look first for the dining room and then the scan of the dining pod, and we're going to open them both. Once we have them both opened, I'm going to go to my dining pod scan, and I'm going to hit Control A to select all, Control C for copy, and then I'm going to click on my dining room screenshot, and I'm going to hit Control V for paste. Now, two things happened when I pasted this in. You can see I just see one corner of the dining pod because it's a huge file, and you can see I have a second layer. So the first thing I'm going to do is double click on where it says layer 1, and we're going to rename this as dining room. Sometimes if you bring in like a JPEG, for example, it will come in on the background layer. And if that's the case, all you do, I'm going to turn this off for a second. All you do is Control A and then to select all. If you right click, it's not going to show up for me now because it's not on the background layer, but you'll see a command that says layer via cut. And if you hit that, then it'll cut the image off the background layer and put it on its own layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my eyeball to turn that layer back on. So I've got my dining room layer here, and then I'm going to double click here and I'm going to rename this dining pod. And this is really helpful to do because if you get a lot of layers within a Photoshop drawing or a Photoshop file, you're going to want to be able to turn things on and off. And so it's really helpful if you have them labeled first. If you find yourself with this marching ants or the marquee box here and it won't go away, you can hit Control D and that will deselect it. Now, as I mentioned, this is a really, really large image because it was scanned at a high resolution. So I'm going to hit Control T to transform it, and you can see some grips are revealed. So I'm going to click and drag down, and then I'm going to move and drag down some more, and I'm just scaling it down so that it fits over my image, and then I'm going to hit enter and it's going to apply that transformation. The next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and make some adjustments to this actual image of the dining pod. The first thing I'm going to do is select the magic wand tool. And if you click here, this is going to grab the sections that are different based on the tolerance in their pixels. And if you recall, when I drew this image, I really wanted to make sure that the edge was a nice, crisp, dark line. And that's because it makes the next step that I'm about to do a lot easier. Make sure that your tolerance is set to 30, around 30, because that way it'll pick up the contrast between these two colors. So we're going to click. And you can see here I'm getting some marching ants coming through. That's what we call that little marquee here. And I'm going to hit Control X to get rid of it. And now you can start to see our dining room image behind. Now I can click the marching ant or this magic wand tool and hit X again to get rid of it. But there might be a little bit of residue left over. So I'm going to go over here and hit my eraser tool. And you can see I've got a really small circle. That's because right here it's set to 12 pixels. I can increase the size a little bit, and I can click and drag and get rid of this. Okay. Now there's a lot more erasing and things that you can do if you want to, but for right now, we're going to just leave it as is. Keep in mind that I can also adjust the hardness of my eraser so that I have something that's really soft on the edge versus really crisp. So I'm going to just leave that as is for now. And now we're going to start to manipulate this actual dining pod itself. Now, when I'm manipulating hand-drawn images within a digital image, it's really important to use the opacity tool to kind of help finesse that image so that it doesn't look like, as we say, a bad ransom note. So if I click on this layer, I'm going to adjust the opacity here. I can use this drag arrow here, or I can enter it in here by clicking and hitting a number like, let's say 54. Once I have that set, now I can start to see where things are within this, where the dining pod interacts with the rest of the elements. So you can see here, I can start to see what's behind the dining pod, what's inside of it, but I might have to adjust a couple of things on it. So I'm going to hit Control T to transform, and I'm going to adjust it just a little bit here so that it sits evenly on that rug. Okay. Then you can see here that the top of my dining pod here, it should be in the center, but it's actually kind of really off center. Now, we have to be careful because we can't do too much photoshopping here without it kind of going too far. But this was an error in perspective, so this needs to be fixed too. So I can do it a couple of different ways. I can hit Control T, and then when I grab that grip up here, I can hold my control button down, and my arrow will turn white, and it will allow me to do a little bit of adjustment just to that top part there. Okay, that's one way that I can do it. Or I can hit Control Z and undo, and I can just snip the top of that off and adjust that part a little bit. So I'm going to use this polygonal or lasso tool, and this allows me to basically cut pieces of it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more before I use it. Make sure I'm on the correct layer. So I'm going to click here, here, and then watch, there's going to be a little O that opens up by my lasso when I get close. See it? And then I click here. Then I right click, and I'm going to do layer via cut, put this on its own layer, zoom out. And now I can just move this. So I can make it a little bit smaller, or I can adjust it by transforming just that top part. So I'm going to see how well I do with that. Okay, so now it's up a little bit straighter. I'm going to hit the enter button. Then I'm going to hit Control E, which is going to merge down. So now the layer that was on top, that was layer one, that was this layer via cut, now is back to its old location. And so now I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and over just a little bit. Okay, and now we have to pull it just a little bit more because you can see here it's extending up against this wall. So perhaps there was some distortion in how I first exported this view, or the view that I drew this dining pot in was slightly different than the view that I have now. Again, that's okay. That's a part of just massaging and finessing these elements so that they end up in the right location. And that's just a part of when you bring these multiple elements together. So I'm trying to get that on the floor right there. Okay, I'm going to come over just a little bit here and adjust it there. Down here. Okay. So what I'm making sure of is that the bottom of this dining pot is touching the floor, and that it's all inside the room. Okay, now I could drive myself crazy by really messing with it to get it exactly right, but at a certain point, you've created your drawing by hand. It is what it is, And so you can only make so many adjustments before you have to redraw it. So I'm going to try to just kind of work with it the best I can here. And that looks pretty good. Okay, now the next thing that we need to do is go ahead and zoom in, and we need to talk about what shows and what hides. Now, this scale figure is inside the dining pod. So I have to erase the dining pod that's covering her. These chairs are also in the dining pod, so those would be shown as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my eraser button and adjust the size to make sure that I can get rid of the elements or get rid of the parts of the dining pod that are covering up what I want to show. Okay. And again, this is just kind of looking at objects, making sure that nothing's getting covered. And again, I'm doing as much as I can with my eraser like this, and then when I have to get a little bit smaller, then I'll come back and kind of refine some of these shapes. So I'm going to pause for right now and erase all of my elements. Okay, so you can see I have come in and erased most of the elements here. I can continue to just kind of zoom in and soften and get really tight up against here. I have also used my polygonal lasso tool for some of these real crisp edges to make sure that they came in and were erased right up against the edge of the table, and just I drew them here and then enclosed them and then hit Control X to get rid of them. But keep in mind, it's really important that you don't erase this part under here, because that's the ground line where the pod is. And so we just want to make sure that we get rid of the pod and where it is behind or covering up the legs here, but we want to make sure to leave the ground line of the pod back there, because again, that's really going to help the viewer. The rest of this, though, for now, we're going to leave. Now, it still has quite a bit more finessing to do, but for right now, we have the pod where we want it, more or less, and then the rest of it, we're going to then have to finesse by hand and then bring it back into Photoshop once more. So in order to save and print this image, what we have to do is actually go over to our file menu and hit Save As. But when we have the options in our drop-down menu of file type to save it as, we want to make sure that we save it as a JPEG. And a JPEG is a flat image, meaning that we will not be able to access or see the layers that we see over here. And that's really helpful because it'll allow us to then print it at a copy shop really easily. Now, keep in mind that you also will do a save of this Photoshop file as well, because eventually we may want to come back and access this file with all of its layers. But for right now, I'm going to hit Save As and then save it as a JPEG image. Now you can see once you've selected that you're going to save it as a JPEG, there's going to be some options here that are just kind of by default. So you're going to go ahead and hit the OK button, and it may take a few minutes on a really big Photoshop file to condense into a JPEG. And so I'm going to pause while it does that. And now you can see I've saved this JPEG as Dining Room Hybrid After Photoshop Phase 1, because we're going to work with this Photoshop file and this rendering a little bit more later. But for right now, we've got this and it's ready to go. So all we're going to do is print it. But I'm going to make sure that we print it as big as possible. So it's going to be a full page. And we want to make sure that we do it in color at a copy shop, so that then we can go in and start to add some hand-drawn elements to further finesse this hybrid image.